I flew across the country with both of my kids sitting beside me, thinking this was going to be one of those memories they'd talk about years from now. A surprise trip to see their mom at her big leadership conference in Denver. Honestly, it felt good just having them excited again. And right after this quick hook, if you're new here, make sure to subscribe for more real stories that hit hard and stay with you. Anyway, Sophie kept asking if her mom would cry when she saw us, and Evan pretended not to care, but I caught him smiling a few times. That small, warm feeling in my chest carried me through the whole flight. Even when Melissa didn't pick up her phone the entire day, I shrugged it off. Conferences get busy. People get overwhelmed. She'd always been the type to vanish into her work until midnight. I told myself it was fine. I told myself everything was fine. When we landed, it was already getting dark, that hazy blue hour when city lights start waking up. I rented a car, plugged the hotel address into the GPS, and tried calling Melissa again. Straight to voicemail. Strange, but not enough to set off alarms. Not yet. Evan kept staring out the window like he was memorizing every building we passed. Sophie hummed some song she picked up from school and kicked her heels against the seat. They were happy. That mattered more than anything. When we pulled up to the hotel, I told them we'd check in first, get a room on her floor, and then surprise her together. Sophie lit up. Evan nodded, trying not to look too eager. But when I stepped up to the reception desk, something cold crept into my chest. My voice sounded steady, casual. "Hey, my wife should already be checked in. Melissa Pierce." The woman behind the desk typed for a moment, then frowned slightly. "It says she arrived earlier this afternoon." "Okay. Great. Could you call up to her room and let her know her family is here?" The receptionist smiled politely and dialed. I waited, and waited, and waited. Then her face shifted. "She's not answering, sir." That cold feeling in my chest got heavier. Is she maybe in the hotel restaurant? Or at an event? She hesitated just long enough for my stomach to twist. "She has one additional guest listed on the room." I blinked, pretending I didn't hear her right. Additional guest? Yes, she checked in with a +1. For a moment, everything around me went muffled, like sound just folded in on itself. My first thought wasn't anger. It was confusion. Then something darker. But with my kids standing 10 feet away, arguing over who got to press the elevator button, I kept my tone steady. "Can you check if she's in the room right now?" The receptionist hesitated again. "Sir, I can't give out room numbers, but security could verify if she's inside. In case of a wellness concern." That phrase was my lifeline. Wellness concern, right? Yeah. My daughter's worried because she hasn't spoken to her mom all day. I kept my voice calm, polite, almost grateful. Something in the receptionist softened. She nodded and picked up the phone. A few minutes later, a hotel security guard walked over and asked me to step aside with him. He looked like a guy who'd seen enough late-night drama to spot trouble from across a lobby. "Your wife hasn't answered calls to the room," he said quietly. "If you'd like, we can check the hallway footage to see when she came in last, just to be sure she's okay." My mouth went dry, but I nodded. "Yes, please." He led me into a small back office that smelled like cold coffee and printer ink. 2 monitors glowed in the dark. He typed something, clicked a few times, then pulled up the hallway outside Melissa's room. Timestamps rolled. Empty hallway, housekeeping cart, a couple laughing as they passed. Then, around 4:17 p.m., the guard paused the screen. There she was. Melissa, my wife. Her hair pulled back the way she did when she wanted to look sharp and effortless. But she wasn't alone. Next to her was a man I'd never seen before. He carried her suitcase in one hand and had his other hand resting low on her back. Too low. They looked like they were arriving for a weekend getaway, not a corporate summit. I watched her laugh in a way I hadn't seen in months, before she slid her key card and walked into the room with him right behind her. The guard didn't say anything. He didn't have to. I felt something in me go very still, like the floor dropped out, but I stayed standing somehow. Panic didn't hit me. Rage didn't hit me. It was worse. It was silence. A heavy, cold, absolute silence that hollowed me out from the inside. "You okay, sir?" the guard finally asked. I nodded, because my kids were upstairs waiting for me to tell them their mom was surprised and happy and ready to hug them. Couldn't break here. Not in this room. Not in front of a stranger. Yeah, I said quietly. Thanks for checking. He studied me for a second longer, then nodded and walked me back toward the lobby. When I stepped out, Evan was sitting on a couch scrolling through his phone, and Sophie was coloring in a small notebook she always kept in her backpack. They both looked up at me with hopeful eyes. Did you talk to Mom? Sophie asked. I swallowed and forced a smile. Not yet, sweetheart. She's busy. We'll see her soon. She accepted that instantly because she trusted everything I said. Evan didn't. He narrowed his eyes, studying my face with that too-old-for-his-age seriousness. But he said nothing, and the silence between us said everything. I checked us into a room a few floors down. We went upstairs. Sophie jumped on her bed. Evan tossed his hoodie on the chair. I stood by the window for a long moment, trying to breathe through the tremor just under my ribs. Then, slowly, quietly, I made a decision. We weren't staying. Not in this hotel. Not on this trip. Not anywhere near the room where Melissa Pierce had checked in with another man. Tonight, I'd get my kids out of here. Tonight, I'd take back what little control I had left. But first, I needed to act like nothing was wrong for just a few more hours. For them. Only for them. I didn't sleep that night. Not even for a minute. After I turned off the lights in our hotel room, Sophie curled up under her blanket and fell asleep almost instantly, clutching her stuffed panda the same way she always did at home. Evan lay on his side facing the wall, earbuds in but no music playing. I knew because I could hear the faint silence leaking from them. He wasn't sleeping either. He was waiting, processing, trying to figure out why his dad suddenly looked like he aged 10 years in a single hour. I lay on top of the comforter, staring at the ceiling, replaying the hallway footage in my mind until it felt burned into the back of my skull. That image, Melissa laughing with him, brushing his arm, walking into the room like a woman on vacation, kept looping over and over. I didn't feel anger. Not yet. What I felt was a crushing disappointment that settled somewhere between my ribs and refused to move. At around 1:30 a.m., when both kids were finally asleep, I slipped out of bed, sat at the desk, and stared at my phone for a long moment. Melissa had sent one message 3 hours earlier. Hey, everything okay? No apology for not picking up. No checking on the kids. No, I miss you guys. Just a vague, almost annoyed question, as if I had interrupted something. Maybe I had. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened the flight app and searched for the earliest return flight home. There was one at 6:20 a.m. seats left. 3. I booked them without thinking twice. The moment the confirmation email hit my inbox, some tight string inside my chest, loosened. Not healed. Not eased. Just released. I looked over at my kids. My whole life in 2 small bodies. They deserved better than whatever version of their mother Melissa had become. I closed the laptop slowly, careful not to make a sound. Then I walked into the bathroom and shut the door quietly, turning on the faint night light. There, in the soft blue glow, I finally allowed myself one silent exhale. The kind you let out when you realize everything you've been holding together is slipping apart. I splashed cold water on my face and stared at myself in the mirror. I didn't look angry. I just looked tired. Tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. When 4:50 a.m. rolled around, I woke the kids gently. Sophie blinked up at me, confused. Daddy, why are we waking up? I forced a smile that felt like it cracked something in my cheek. We're heading home, sweetheart. Early. She rubbed her eyes, then yawned and nodded. Evan sat up slowly, watching me the way someone watches a burning building from a safe distance. Eyes narrowed, jaw tight, knowing it's bad but not ready to name it. Are we not seeing Mom? He asked. The way he said Mom made my chest ache. I shook my head. She's busy with conference things. We'll see her when we get back. His jaw tensed, but he didn't argue. He just stood, pulled on his hoodie, and zipped his backpack without a word. And I hated that he already understood more than he should. We checked out quietly. The lobby was empty except for a tired-looking night manager who handed me the final receipt. I didn't look at it. I didn't want to see anything with Melissa's name on it. The only thing I left behind was on purpose. Before leaving the room, Sophie had drawn a little card. She'd spent half the night working on it without me realizing. "For Mommy," she'd written in big, uneven letters, with a heart underneath and a little stick figure family holding hands. She asked me to put it on Mommy's bed so she'd see it first thing in the morning. Couldn't tell her no. So I placed it gently on the pillow in our room, not Melissa's, and underneath it, I slid a folded note. My handwriting was calm. Too calm. The kids deserved better. So did I. Nothing more. Nothing less. At the airport, Sophie fell asleep on my shoulder while we waited at the gate. Evan sat beside me, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, staring at the ground like it had answers he was searching for. After a while he spoke. "Dad, something's wrong. Isn't it?" I closed my eyes for a second. I didn't want to lie to him, but I also couldn't shatter him right there in a terminal surrounded by strangers. "We'll talk at home. Okay?" He didn't push. He just nodded slowly and looked away, jaw tight. The flight itself was a blur. Sophie slept the whole time. Evan looked out the window with that blank expression teenagers get when they're trying not to feel something. And I sat there, replaying our last morning at home. The rushed goodbye. Melissa's distracted kiss on my cheek. The way she said, "I'll call you tonight," without even looking up from her suitcase. She never did. When we landed and drove home, the house felt different the moment we stepped inside. Colder. Too quiet. Evan went straight to his room. Sophie went to the living room and curled up on the couch with her panda. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the coffee mug Melissa had left behind, lipstick still faintly smudged on the rim. I picked it up, put it back down, and that's when my phone buzzed. Not Melissa. HR. "Mr. Pierce, could you call us regarding an incident at the conference?" My stomach dropped. They knew, or at least someone did. The truth always comes out eventually. I didn't respond. Not yet. Not until I had the strength. I sat down at the kitchen table, put my head in my hands, and stayed like that until the sound of Sophie's small footsteps came padding toward me. "Daddy, can we call Mommy now?" I lifted my head slowly. My throat tightened. "Not right now, sweetheart." She nodded, trusting me completely. And that trust, pure, undeserved, absolute, cut deeper than anything Melissa had done in that hotel. Because I knew the truth. I knew what my daughter didn't. Her mother wasn't coming home. Not the way she remembered. Not the way she hoped. And the weight of that truth settled on me like a second spine. Heavy, permanent, impossible to shake. For the first 2 days after we got home, the house felt like a waiting room. Not for Melissa. No, I think some part of me already accepted she wasn't walking back into this doorway with her suitcase and her fake apology. But for the truth to finally settle its weight on all three of us. Sophie kept drawing pictures for her mom and taping them to the fridge. Evan kept pretending he didn't care, burying himself in his phone, only to glance at the front door every time a car slowed down outside. And me? I moved through the rooms like a ghost, picking up small pieces of a life that didn't belong to me anymore. On the third morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing nonstop. Emails, missed calls. Melissa finally decided to remember her family existed. But the first notification wasn't from her. It was from HR again. "Mr. Pierce, this is urgent. Please call at your earliest convenience." Urgent. Corporate urgent, which usually means someone messed up so badly that paperwork alone can't bury it. I ignored it. I made breakfast for the kids instead. Pancakes for Sophie, toast for Evan, even though he barely touched it. The entire time, I could feel the weight of him watching me. Waiting. Finally, he said it. "Dad, are you and Mom getting a divorce?" The question hit me harder than anything in that hotel. Not because he asked, but because of how he asked. Quiet, controlled, like he had already built the answer in his head and just needed me to confirm it. I sat down across from him, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee I didn't even remember pouring. "We're figuring things out," I said, knowing it wasn't enough but not ready to crush him fully. Evan looked down, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle twitch. She didn't even message me, he whispered. Or Sophie. Why would she? His voice cracked before he finished. I reached across the table and put my hand over his. He didn't pull away. That was something. Sophie, thankfully, was humming to herself in the living room, building a fort from couch cushions and blankets. She was safe in her own little world. For now. The phone buzzed again. This time it was Melissa. Call me. Where are the kids? Adam, pick up the phone. Evan's eyes flicked toward the screen, but he didn't say anything. I didn't either. I stood up, walked into the hallway, and finally answered. Her voice came through sharp, tense, and already irritated. Adam, what the hell is going on? I took a slow breath. We're home. You left? Without saying anything to me? There was no disbelief in her tone, just offense, like I'd broken some unspoken rule of her script. You were busy, I replied. I didn't trust myself to say more. Busy? Adam. Her voice cut off as someone spoke in the background. A man's voice. Low. Familiar in a sickening way. The same one who held her suitcase. I ended the call. She immediately called back. Then again. And again. I turned the phone off. The silence that followed felt cleaner than anything else had in days. By noon, HR called from a different number. I stepped out onto the porch so the kids wouldn't hear. The woman on the line sounded nervous. Rehearsed. Mr. Pierce, there was an incident at the summit involving your wife and one of her colleagues. We'd like to clarify a few things. I almost laughed. Clarify? Sure. I told her calmly that I had no intention of discussing my wife's personal decisions with her employer. The line went quiet. Then she said very softly, Sir, the other party's spouse has already filed a formal complaint. We were informed you may have information. So his wife knew. That explained the panic. Good. Let him deal with the fallout he earned. I ended the call after that. I didn't owe them anything. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Lunch, homework, cartoons. I kept myself busy, cleaning things that didn't need cleaning, organizing things that didn't need organizing. I didn't want to think, but thoughts seep into the cracks anyway. Late that evening, after I put Sophie to bed, I found Evan sitting at the top of the stairs. He looked up with that same guarded expression. Dad, you're leaving her, right? The directness hit me. I sat beside him on the step. I didn't sugarcoat it anymore. Yeah. His shoulders dropped. Not in relief but resignation. Like he'd already carried the truth on his back and was just waiting for me to finally say it out loud. She chose someone else over us, he murmured. I swallowed hard. She made choices that weren't fair to any of us, I said carefully. But that doesn't mean she doesn't love you. He scoffed under his breath. Dad, love isn't supposed to look like that. The simplicity of his statement cut through me. I put a hand on his shoulder. We're going to get through this. All three of us. He nodded slowly. For the first time, he leaned into me, just a little, resting his head against my arm. He hadn't done that since he was 10. When he finally went to bed, I walked downstairs, sat at the kitchen table, and opened my laptop. I stared at the blank screen for a long time. In the end, there were only 4 words I needed to type. Petition for divorce. I filled out the rest, step by step, page by page, feeling each click separate me further from the man I was last week. When I finished, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel broken either. I felt settled, like the ground finally stopped shaking. I closed the laptop and let out a long breath. My phone was still off, and for a moment, I considered turning it on just to see what Melissa had said. But then I imagined the flood of messages. The excuses, the half-truths, the lies, the apologies meant to protect herself, not us. I left it off. Instead, I walked to the living room and picked up the card Sophie made for her. For Mommy, written in pink marker, with the little heart she colored in too hard so the paper wrinkled. I held it for a long time. This wasn't my daughter's heartbreak to carry yet. But one day, not now, not soon, but one day, I'd have to explain why that card stayed on the fridge instead of going into her mother's hands. I placed it gently back where she left it. Then I looked around the quiet house, the one Melissa had walked out of long before she ever stepped into that hotel room. I turned off the lights, checking the locks the way I always did. But tonight, for the first time, the house didn't feel empty. Felt mine, ours. A place she no longer had the power to break. And before heading upstairs, before ending the night, I whispered something into the dark kitchen. Not for her, but for me. We deserved better, and we're finally getting it. And if you're still here listening, make sure to subscribe for more real stories like this one. Stories that stay with you long after they end.